you are presented with one vision of what it is, and at one point that sort of radically changes. Cristin, on the other hand, she was on set, of course, so her performance was on set, and editing her was an absolute joy. I mean, she was truly fantastic.
You brought up that you just finished a project. Is that project Orphan 3?
It is, yeah. I mean, we've had such an incredible experience on that movie. The one thing I would say is, like, anytime you touch anything that has a rabid fan base, just be aware of it, what we're willing to fight for, because the film is very light. It's very, very cute, it's very pink.
I gotta watch it in theaters, man. I gotta, no spoilers.
Yeah,
for
like
me
if people
either,
are
man.
listening now, please just go watch it first, then listen to me rattle on about it.
Josh Ethier, welcome to Chatterbox.
Thank you for having me, yeah.
Yes, sir. With Buddy coming out this week, how excited are you for audiences to finally see this film?
Very. It was when it played at Sundance, we really had no idea how it was going to go over. It's a remarkably weird film. And it's very, very much in line with what folks would expect from Casper Kelly, who's like this giant, gentle genius, who is just wonderful to work with, like absolutely spectacular to work with. And I didn't quite know what to expect, except that I loved the script. When I read it, I thought it was so much fun, and I could already start seeing it in my head, but I had no idea how they were going to do so many of the different things that they ended up doing really well. So once I started seeing dailies, I was just like, this is fantastic. This is exactly what I was hoping it would be, like, in my head. And then when we played the film at Sundance, it got such a great reaction. It was so fun to just like lean out into the aisle and watch people watch the movie. So I'm excited to do that now, hopefully at a multiplex around here, to go see some people watch the movie and see what their takeaway is from it. Because they even, there's even a huge difference between like a festival crowd and just like a Friday night audience who's just, excited to go see this movie, from the creator of Too Many Cooks and the producers of Weapons, like what they probably have no idea what they're in for. And I think that's the best thing about it. Like, I love that they didn't even do a traditional trailer for it. It's really just teasers that lean into the style of the movie. So
yeah, and the marketing of the movie has been crazy. Just the episodes from Buddy and him giving out free hugs at a random parlor. It's just like the most wild marketing. I've never seen it before.
I love it. They have the little, like, the documentaries of like Buddy teaching you how to dance, and they released the Buddy Glide early, which I had already been singing for like a year walking around my apartment. So yeah, no, I think they've done a really good job of it, and that is exactly what the movie is. So it's perfect.
I heard Casper Kelly describe the film as Barney, but a horror movie, which I think is so on point, because that's my immediate first thought when I first saw the trailer of the film. You talked about how that the film editor is the last bridge between the script and how it's presented to the audience. So how does Buddy meet those expectations? How does it differ? How does the original script of Buddy compare to what we're going to see in theaters?
I think with Buddy, there's so many different tonal adjustments throughout the movie, which, again, I don't want to give anything away, but you are presented with one vision of what it is, and at one point that sort of radically changes. And as a result, we were very, very cognizant, and we were very, very careful about people's expectations, people's ideas as far as like pacing was concerned. We did test screen the film. We had some friends watch it as well. And just try to get an idea of like making sure that people were along for the different sections of the ride. I would say that the bones of the film are all in the script. There's no great diversion, but there was definitely like little lifts and pulls here and there to try to make, this section more succinct, or maybe this was something that the effect didn't quite work as well on set, and we're like, okay, cool, we're just going to get past that. And also just to engineer as much of a ride as we could to make sure that it was exciting and interesting moment to moment, beat to beat, and there wasn't anything where it's like, oh, we're hanging a little bit too long, or if we do hang around a little bit too long, that's on purpose and we're doing something really awkward or uncomfortable. So it was really just about regulating and modulating those kinds of things. It wasn't really about rebuilding the idea from scratch. There was a couple of wild swings that we took, which didn't pan out editorially. Like there was an idea at one point to do things a little bit more, say, another way, which, again, I don't want to give anything away.
Yeah.
But And ultimately we decided like, no, I think how the script had it was as good as it was going to get. It's just it's a perfect way to present things. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that we were able to test that out though, and experiment a little bit and kind of keep things the way that Casper originally envisioned, which is fantastic.
I love how you bring up the intention behind tonal edits and edits for pace and all those things. You also you talked about how the editor goes through hours and hours of differing performances from the actors, and he has to make decisions based off of tone or other intentions. I'm curious to what going through the differing performances, the hours of performances by Keegan-Michael Key, who is the voice of Buddy, and also Cristin Milioti, who's also in the film. I'm curious to how going through those performances were.
Well, it's funny because Keegan actually did the voice after the film was already edited. So what we did is there was a big point during the middle of the movie there. Of course, we had an actor in the suit on set who was like giving their performance, just so obviously we had everything, but we knew at one point we were going to have to swap that voice out. But there was a large part of the movie for its life where it was both that actor who was originally in the suit and then myself using just like a microphone, temping in lines and trying to like do a bunny impression and keep those things just so we could sort of follow along as best we could. So Keegan actually he came in and he had like a couple days in a recording booth, and I was lucky enough to sit through those on Zoom because they were kind of happening like all over the country, which was wild. We were having voice actors in New York, we had voice actors down in Atlanta where Casper's from. It was wild. It was a really cool experience. But having Keegan there and seeing him work with Casper and seeing them kick ideas back and forth, and then interjecting with like, oh, this thing was really cool, I loved this, or spitballing some lines with like producers, actors, writers, directors. Like it was a very creative and very fulfilling experience getting a chance to do that. Cristin, on the other hand, she was on set, of course, so her performance was on set. And editing her was an absolute joy. I mean, she was truly fantastic. In a movie that is this weird and is this ridiculous, the thing that you really need to make it all work and to keep everything together and to keep the audience invested moment to moment is that emotional connection, which she has in the film. Which again, I don't want to give anything away. I really want people to enjoy.
I gotta watch it in theaters, man. I gotta no spoilers.
Yeah,
for
like
me
if people
either,
are
man.
listening now, please just go watch it first, then listen to me rattle on about it. But Cristin, her performance was really the thing that makes the entire movie work, because you could recreate a 90s kids show, you could inject it with all the horror elements, you could do all that stuff, but if you don't have any emotional resonance with characters, you're not really going to feel anything, and it's going to feel kind of wasted. It'll be like, great, yeah, no, it's fun to look at, it's it's convincing, but is it a movie I want to watch a bunch of times? Not really. And she and her and Delaney Quinn, the young actress who plays our lead Freddie, like they brought that so heavily into the movie and make all of the weird humor and awkward humor and uncomfortable scares and make all that stuff work because you're with them for the ride. So she was phenomenal to edit. I loved looking through her takes. She would give a little flash of something here, a little flash of something over here, and just getting the chance to sort of like sculpt that as part of that process was really satisfying. It's something I'm genuinely grateful for.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that at all because I'm such a huge fan of Cristin. Her performance in The Penguin was amazing. I loved her in How I Met Your Mother, so I've been a fan since back then. And I think we need a edit of the movie where it's your voice as Buddy.
No, that already existed, and it was fine. But no, he's hilarious, and he totally got it 100%. It was so funny, like seeing him do that and like exactly like this with like a little zoom camera where you're looking and he's there in the booth and he's like using his full body in the performance and everything. It was so awesome to see because I've been such a big fan of his for such a long time.
I think I want to take it back so that I can just rattle off and talk about all the other movies that you've also been a part of that you brought to light. So you brought up that you just finished a project. Is that project Orphan 3?
It is, yeah.
I heard you talk about when you first read the script, how excited you were when you read the script. Now that you're editing and finishing Orphan 3, how does your excitement compare to the final cut now?
Oh, I mean, we've had such an incredible experience on that movie. I worked with the director William Brent Bell before on Orphan First Kill, And this time we just settled right into like a fantastic working relationship. So him, the sound team, like all folks that we've worked with on the last film, we had them all back. Same producers, same folks involved. It was really just, it was like getting the band back together. It was very, very simple and easy to do. But what we had on the last movie was we had a movie in the pandemic, and we didn't quite know, this, like, I guess it was 12 years after the first film when we did First Kill, and we're like, we have no idea if this is going to work, but like, we love the franchise. Like, yeah, let's do, the best that we can. And there were certain things about the script of First Kill that attracted me. One was the idea of these two women just like going head to head, Isabel Fuhrman and her name escapes me, Julia Stiles. It's fantastic. And like seeing the two of them go head to head throughout that movie in an almost like soap opera fashion in this orphan world was like what really attracted me to the script. And this film doesn't try to redo that in any way. It really moves forward into, what else can we do with this franchise? And again, I can't give anything away because that one literally just finished. But we tested it, and we were amazed at how good the response was from the audience when they saw it. And that also sort of like lit a fire under Paramount, which is fantastic because they were on board the film as we were getting shooting, and they got behind it in a really big way. So I'm hoping that goes even bigger and bolder than it had in the past. They've been amazing to work with on it. And yeah, I finished it up last week. I'm finally off the film. We had done like sound design and mixing and color and visual effects and like all that stuff has been completed. And I keep saying to Brent, the director, I'm waiting for the other shoe to fall because the whole process has just been fantastic. That like when is it we're gonna find out like, oh, the movie's getting shelved or something. Like that's how good it's been, is that you feel like that's just like bound to happen. But I can't wait for people to see that. I hope they start releasing trailers for it soon. It's fun to see the fan speculation online. Like I have people tagging me in Instagram posts with fake posters and all this kind of stuff. And like, I even had somebody from one fan account like message me and was like, is the film completed yet? Like, I'm not going to answer. Of course. So yeah, it's wild. It's been fun. It's been a really good time. I'm very excited for people to see that movie. I mean, just like Buddy, it's a movie that's, again, I won't give it away, but it just does things that you would not ever expect that franchise to be doing and is insane because of it. So yeah, I'm very, very excited for people to see it.
Yeah, Isabel Fuhrman's performance in the first two is good, so I can't wait to see her performance in this third
She's
one.
The best. She's awesome. She's so much fun to work with. She's so creative, and that character is entirely hers, and she has such a heavy say in that character. And usually, and you would think that would be like some kind of privilege, but really it's just way more work. But she does it happily, and she does such a great job, and she's so great to work with.
I want to take it back to a different film that you previously worked on that already came out called Companion, that you co-edited with Brett Bachman.
Yep, very good friend of mine, Brett Bachman.
Is your favorite scenes from that film still, when you look back on it, is it still the Sergei death scene? And is it also still the Jack Quaid and Sophie Thatcher scene at the dinner table?
Oh yeah, I still love those two scenes. I love that whole movie. I think that was one of the better experiences I've ever had in my life. The whole crew on that movie, top to bottom, were just absolutely fantastic. Those producers I'd worked with before, I actually cut their first film, Contracted, like 12 years ago. And now Buddy was just my third film with them, which is crazy to think about. They're really great guys, JD and Rafi, and then Ben Marco and Tracy, who work with them as well. Really great folks. Yeah, no, that one, there's nothing bad I could ever say about that process. That was like a really fulfilling experience. I met a lot of great folks on that I've been lucky to work with again since. The whole crew of that movie, we still get together and hang out. Like that's how great it was that we all still just like go out to dinner and drinks all the time still. Like they were just a great group of people, very talented, very creative. And I'm very proud of the work that we did on the movie. I think it's certainly for Brett and I think it's one of the best films that either of us has worked on. And that's saying a lot because Brett and I together have cut like 50, 60 films. But yeah, we're both still really immensely proud of that. And I love that it had this sort of like second life on Letterbox, where a lot of people were discovering it later. It did, whatever at the box office, like 15, 20 million or something like that. But then people just kept watching it and kept watching it on like HBO Max. I know it's on Netflix now. It's crazy the sort of like post theater life that movie has had. So I'm very grateful for that as well. That's the one that people most ask me about when I either meet on a new project or, do something like this, like an interview or a podcast where people want to ask about Companion. And I hope that continues.
Yeah, because those scenes in particular, the way that those scenes are cut up and edited builds the intensity of what's happening in the story so well, especially the Sergei death scene where we see the build up, but then we don't see the death immediately. We cut to her already inside and bloodied up, and she's trying to explain to the other characters what's happening, and then we cut in and out, and this intercut. It's just, that scene is just woven so perfectly in order to show that death scene.
It's funny because it was written that way in the script, and that it was like going to be intercut. But if I remember correctly, the points in the script are different where those intercuts happen, and that was one thing that Drew, the director, asked me about when I sort of like first came on board. He was like, take a look at that scene, like see if there's another. And we experimented with a lot of different ins and outs on when to get in, when to get out. We did a lot of different passes with different types of music, because the film is very light. It's very, very cute. It's very pink. Like there's a lot of, like happy vibes. And Rishi Hirakash, who did the music, is like very like sort of like major chord, very beautiful. But that scene is so different because you're witnessing an assault. And so it was like, we wanted to make sure that we got it right. We wanted to make sure that it built up the expectations, the twist coming at the end of that, opening, or not opening, but like, I guess that's like 15, 20 minutes into the movie, but like waiting that long to reveal to the audience what the film is kind of about. There was a lot riding on it. So it was definitely one that we tried to put as much work as we could into, and try to make sure we were doing the right, regulation of that information, and make sure that everything sort of played the best that it could.
Netflix's original film, Don't Move, introduces a very interesting challenge for the filmmakers in that film, which is that the main protagonist's character, like the title, she becomes paralyzed. She can't move. She becomes paralyzed in the film. So I'm curious, how did that challenge you when it came to editing that film?
That was really difficult, honestly, because usually it's your main character who keeps things moving along. So if your character can't move, that presents you with you don't want it to feel like, oh, we're just trapped here and it's getting kind of boring. So that we heavily relied on her perspective, going to her face, showing her face, even if she couldn't quite act, or she couldn't quite have a big explosive reaction. Little things like eye twitches and breaths and things like that, like try to get across that she's understanding what's happening, and use that to then compress the information that's happening around her so that it's still thrilling for the audience and moves along. There's a few sequences where, like when she first becomes paralyzed in that movie, and like the first time her body completely shuts down and she's just like laying in the grass, like that's kind of the one moment we wanted it to be like, oh, this is what we're going to do. Like, this is what we're going to do for the rest of the film. But then after that, it's actually like pretty pulse pounding, like, the sequence inside the house, which ends up getting burnt down, the gas station sequence, when the cop pulls him over on the side, like there's so many different things that go on in that movie where she is a spectator, but we just keep using her perspective to move things faster, and jump things forward, and there was a lot of line trimming. There was a lot of, editorial compression techniques, make people move faster over here, come around the car faster, like upcutting a lot of things to make sure that we were like constantly moving forward, and weren't boring our audience with a character who's just, laying there like a bump on a log. And Kelsey did a great job in that performance as well, because she learned really early on how to communicate things like fear or expectation with just like her eye, not even eyes, but her eye, or like the slightest twitch of a nose, or a sharp breath. She figured all that stuff out early, and I relied on that crazy heavily in the editing room, and I think she did a great job for that.
Yeah, I love all the beats that you picked to really focus in on the subtlety of her performance. When I think about that, I think of the cop scene and just how much suspense and intensity that scene it takes the audience on. I'm curious to what your method behind and what your intention is when you're building scenes that have to stretch that rubber band of suspense.
I would say that first and foremost, I just think about myself as a viewer. I try to watch everything. I try to watch as much as I can. I try to watch like 300 movies a year, and not just great movies, some terrible movies that are also enjoyable. Like old schlocky movies, new modern movies. I watch tons of like foreign films, Japanese films, Soviet films, Austrian films. I try to watch everything I can because people all over the world are doing things in such an interesting way, and like bringing all of that into my expertise is what I'm trying to do. So for that one in particular, it was always just about like, as a viewer, what do I know? As a viewer, what am I interested in? What if there is extra information in this scene, do I actually need it? Does it add up to anything later? Or is this something that we can move through faster? Because again, we have to be aware that our protagonist can't move. She doesn't move. She just lays there the whole time. So it was all about understanding where the audience was at any given moment. And I have to give both Brian Netto and Adam Schindler, directors in that movie, huge amount of credit, because once the film was shot, they basically took the script and just threw it away. And they were like, now it's an edit, and we have to only think about the edit. We're not beholden to a script anymore. We don't need to make sure that all of this is included. We can think about it and modulate it accordingly, because they wanted the same thing I wanted, which is a tight, fun thriller that an audience would be happy to sit through and wouldn't feel as though they were like cheated in some way by the concept.
Yeah, it must be art to bring a bunch of different directors and different writers' visions to life. When you first started your career, and you still work with him a lot, with Joe Bigas, you work with him a lot. You started your career with him. I believe your first feature film debuted at Toronto International Film Festival with him.
You did, yeah. Midnight Madness at TIFF.
Midnight Madness, yeah. And so I'm curious, I'm curious as to the huge difference between working on a project with a long-term friend with Joe versus working with like Osgood Perkins on Gretel and Hansel.
Well, I think it's just really just the shorthand. Anybody you work with multiple times, you start to understand a little bit about each other, which sometimes can get in the way, but not always. And Joe and I, we had been friends for years before we ever made a film together. Like, him and I went to high school together. So I used to just go hang out at his house and watch movies, and then we would go out with a video camera and shoot like a ghost short film in the woods where we grew up. So I've known Joe forever, basically. I know his whole family. He's still my best friend to this day. So working with Joe is very easy. We talk very freely and openly with each other. On his films, I'm also on set, and a lot of editors like to have a bit of distance away from set because they want to like remain sort of exclusive to just the footage and have that be their their perception of stuff. But I learned very early that I'm able to separate those things. So when I'm on set with Joe, it's all about, oh, make sure you grab this or make sure you grab that, or he'll come to me and say, this is a shot I really want to do. Do you think this is going to work with that? And I'm like, yeah, of course, like absolutely, go for it. He's very perceptive when it comes to camera movements and blocking and staging and everything. So it's really just nice to have the editor there to be able to say like, oh, just as a safety, there's something we could grab. And then when we cut together, it's just like hanging out. So which is something we we always do anyway. So it's super simple, and it is hard working with someone for the first time and trying to figure out, personality wise, is this going to be a good thing, a bad thing, and I'm very lucky in that it's most always a good thing, especially with like Oz. Like Oz was very intimidating because I loved his first film when it was Blackcoat's Daughter. I saw it at Toronto actually when it was named February. So I really loved his work before we worked together. And I was like, oh, I wonder how he's going to be. But he was fantastic to work with. He's like the nicest guy in the world. I met like his kids. They would come in and hang out with us in the editing room. His daughter was doing like temp vocal recording. He's just fantastic. And he's super open to everything. And he's like crazy funny. So I'm very lucky that a lot of the folks I've worked with, I've been able to build a relationship like that with. And for some reason now I have like all these movies behind me. So also I think directors now take me more seriously. So it makes it easier to get to that next step of, we're just basically hanging out in a room and talking about movies.
Yeah, Oscar does some really good stuff. I'm a huge fan of the way he did Long Legs. your love of horror films, where does that come from? Does that come with hanging out with Joe a lot, and this is all Joe's doing? He got you, he's like, I love horror films.
No, I honestly, I think it's just it feels like a big part of growing up in New England because New England is loaded with ghost stories, And when I was a kid, my dad loved like John Carpenter movies. I'd have to like sneak around, the hallway and like peer down a dark hallway to watch like whatever he was watching, whatever he was renting from like a local video store. And my dad always fell asleep like 10 minutes into the movie. So then for like 80 minutes, it's just this kid standing in the hallway watching. So I used to like scare the crap out of myself when I was a kid, just like just basically sneaking out of my room at night to watch horror movies with my dad. But then, I'm also a big fan of heavy metal. I've always been a big fan of like heavy music, and there's a lot of horror and fantasy in heavy music. So I feel like naturally just gravitated towards those things as I grew up. And then, yeah, becoming friends with Joe, and Joe was a huge horror fan. He would go to like Fangoria conventions, and, his dad would drive him out to Boston or down to New Jersey or something. So he always had like a great library of horror films. So when I was like 14 or 15, when we met, just catching up with him, and like some of them I had already seen, all the Halloweens and Friday the 13th. But then Joe was like, oh yeah, but you never saw Texas Chainsaw 2 or The Prowler, or it's like something like this. So but that was a great way to spend high school, just like hanging out with my friends and watching horror movies. And I just turned it into a career somehow.
Yeah. And I don't know if you heard this, but A24 is developing a new Leatherface film with Curry Barker. You worked
Yeah.
on the 2017 Leatherface. That's the film you edited. So, is there is there any expectation that you have for that film, or is there any advice that you would give to the editor of that film?
I mean, if it's Curry, he's probably going to edit it himself. He edited Obsession, and I have no advice for him. He can give me some advice. He made $380 million at the box office. The one thing I would say is like anytime you touch anything that has a rabid fan base, just be aware of it, because I know as soon as anyone mentions that, like they're doing the Possession remake now, and you see people sharing it, like, why does this exist? Fans get very, very excited about whatever it is that whatever it is that they love, and somebody suddenly is like, oh, we want to cash in on that love you have for it, so they get real amped up. But also, I think he made a fantastic film. I'm sure he has a fantastic idea for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and that's why they went for him. So, no, my only advice is to make something that hopefully we haven't seen before. That would be awesome.
You talked about how editors, they're constantly making choices on what to keep and what not to keep. When I ask you if there is a scene that you had to fight for in order to keep into the cut, what scene pops into your brain and from what movie?
Oh man, I there's a famous story about Kevin Tent, who is Alexander Payne's editor, who paid him $100 to leave a scene the way that he wanted it in Election, and then that's the scene that a lot of people point at now, and he's like, best $100 I ever spent. But honestly, I don't think I've run into that with any of my directors. I feel like there's a pretty open dialogue about what we want, what we really love, what we're willing to fight for with producers, with, if a censor is involved or anything like that. So I haven't really run into a situation where my hand has had to be forced and remove something. I can pretty much stand behind most of what's left in all my films. But I guess that's very lucky too. Also, you have to remember that I worked on a lot of indies where people aren't necessarily telling you like you have to take that out. So it's all about leaving it all in there to try to maximize a sale, to try to maximize like a splash at a festival. But as I work on more and more studio stuff, maybe that question will be more relevant than ever in like maybe like 10 years or something.
Yeah.
But so far, no, there's never been anything that had to be like yanked out.
A movie popped into my brain. You worked on a ton of horror movies, and one of them that really sticks out to me is a film, Mayhem, with Stephen Yeun and Samara Weaving. That's a crazy film about office space, and it's like The Purge and a bunch of action sequences. What's your experience working on that project and editing those performances?
Oh, that was great. I'm a huge, huge, huge Steve Yeun fan. He's in like one of my favorite films, Burning.
I
And
love
working with
that
him was
film. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Burning. And working with him was totally a dream, as was Samara Weaving, who at the time was, I mean, that was right at the beginning of her, rise to the top. Now she's like one of the absolute like scream queens in the genre. But they were both fantastic to work with. They both gave great performances. The director of that movie, Joe Lynch, was a longtime friend of mine. I worked as an assistant editor for the editor that cut Wrong Turn 2 for him. And so I met Joe very early. Actually, the first night that I moved to Los Angeles, Begas and I, we went to a screening of The Fly at the Cinerama Dome. It was like a 70 millimeter screening of The Fly at the Dome. And that night met Joe Lynch and Adam Green, who later both of those guys I cut a film for. So I've known Joe Lynch forever. He's a great guy, and working on that was, I think on that one I was either just coming off of or just about to go on to a movie with my other friend Evan Katz, which was Small Crimes, which went to Netflix. So I can't remember which order they were at, but then both of those films were at South by Southwest. So I had two there in that year. So that was a great experience. I had a blast on that one. We cut that one out of my apartment. Something like 800 visual effect shots for the eyes. So it was a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, Joe's really fun to work with because he just loves movies. And so it's very easy to talk with him if you like movies. And we had a really we just had a great time working on it. It was a ton of fun.
Josh, I can't wait to see Buddy in theaters. I can't wait to see Orphan 3 when everything comes out. And thank you for your time, man.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Like I said.